My guest tonight is a Nigerian writer, author of 2 books, The Fisherman from 2015, which has been translated into Polish already, and an Orchestra of Minorities, published last year, which, as I understand, has also been translated, but it has not been published as yet. It's probably going to be published at the end of September in Polish. Both of these books, it is fair to say, shook the literary world. They were both shortlisted for the Booker Prize, which is the most important literary award in the English-speaking world. Both books are set in Nigeria, at least partially, in one case, in one of these books. Both deal with great human subjects, like love, hatred, life and death, free will, destiny. Both talk about the history and culture of Nigeria, as well as the clash between African and Western worlds. And if I may say so at the beginning, both are enormous artistic achievements. It is literature that deals with these great subjects in a style that draws from traditional mythology, both African, especially Igbo culture from Nigeria, and Western literary sources as well. And I must say, I feel privileged, and I hope you will feel privileged to have read the books and to be able to meet our guest, albeit online, tonight. Chigozie Obioma, I hope, is with us in Lincoln, Nebraska. Hello, Chigozie.
Yes, I am here. I am
It's
here.
very good
Great
to see
you. Dariusz, yes.
Yeah. Well, Paulina told me, Paulina, who's the organizer of this event, told me that you'd rather talk about writing than politics. And
well, not exactly. I just gave her like an example where that dominates everything. Of course, there's a lot of politics, as you said, in my novel. So I just don't want to be the one talking about the state of Nigeria or Africa.
I promise you, you won't be talking all the time about it. But yeah, but I think these books are embedded in these main themes of our times, social themes as well. This clash between the North and South, etc., immigration, Nigerian politics as well. So we'll come to that, but well, let's talk about literature first.
All right.
And I would like to start with something which I think is a recurring theme in both of these books, which is family. The Fisherman is a story of siblings, and An Orchestra of Minorities is a story of a man eaten by this passion, by this desire to construct a family, a traditional Nigerian family. Did you think of these, when you started writing, did you think of these stories as family stories?
Well, again, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much to the organizers of Big Book Festival, Paulina and everyone, and as well as you, Dariusz. I've heard a lot about you. Well, conceiving The Fisherman, it definitely was conceived from the beginning as a kind of a family story. If you look at where the inspiration itself came from, it was me just thinking about my own family. So I was living in Cyprus, which is very far, obviously, from Nigeria. And so, I conceived of this family and wanted that to be, obviously, the microcosm or the stepping part towards exploring the larger subjects that you talked about. But for An Orchestra of Minorities, I thought that it would be interesting to have a character who is alone, divorced from his family. Of course, by the unfortunate situations of death around him. So being alone also shows the starkness of where life can put us. So you can become somebody who, you can start off as someone who has everyone with you, and then, suddenly you lose everything.
Can you tell us about your family? Because as I understand, you come from a special, a very particular family, even by Nigerian standards.
Yeah, well, it was exactly so. So right now we have, it's a family of 12 children. Of course, we're all mostly grown up now. We are starting our own family, so already have one. But growing up, I thought that it was a very eccentric family. And for me, I think the stuff of literature, of fiction, what drives fiction is, of course, character, you know. And so what makes for an interesting character is eccentricity. So I saw my own family as eccentric, and you know, uh, you know, my dad was like, a very hardworking guy, at least to his mind. And then, he married my mom, and she was mostly a stay-home mom, but she also had jobs, but they ended up having quite a lot of kids, you know. So that was very interesting growing up. Yes.
And especially in the case of the fisherman, it's you are talking about a place, as I understand, that you grew up in. Is that right? And the book is narrated by a child, by a small child. How much of it is autobiographical? And another question is, how important and how particular was it for you to place a child in the position of the teller of the story?
Well, the first question is very clear to me. At the same time, it's complicated. So nuance is everything in my writing. So I would say that it was inspired by my own family, and there are elements that are real life. For instance, I like to say that the town Akure, where the fisherman is set, is true. It's me trying to like recreate an actual place. So every setting, every place, every spot in that novel is real. It's true. The church, the school, all of that stuff.
When we see the picture of the town, it is how it looked like when you were growing up.
Yes. Oh, exactly. Yeah, it was like that. But the characters are figments of lived experience. So I have a montage, for instance, in Ikenna, the oldest brother of the boys, of myself, of my siblings. Some of the interesting things we did are all brought together into one. So I dedicated the novel to my siblings, and when they read the book, they all try to find themselves in the novel, and they're like, "Well, but this thing looks like me, but the other guy also looks like me." So, well, none of it is you. It's just an exaggerated, montage. But the second question about the perspective of the narrator is something that I gave a lot of thought to. At the end of the day, I wanted to have a cyclical narration. So the novel begins, and it ends at the beginning. So there's a posturing by the narrator that he's telling the story from a court, but also there are interventions throughout the narrative of Benjamin as an adult, who now has a child of his own. So there are dual narrators there that are the same. There's Benjamin, who is, a young folk, about 10 years old, telling the story in court, recollecting some of the eccentricities of childhood there in his voice. But there's also the older and more perceptive and insightful Benjamin, who is having some interpretations and judgments as he recalls the story. So both voices meld into one.
And it must be said as well that these are linear narratives, in the sense that you have the beginning, the middle, and the end, which is not always the case in modern literature, or postmodern literature, whatever you call it. And what me as a reader as well loved about these novels is that that the characters are developed, and they are different at the beginning. They are different from what they are at the end, obviously, which seems banal, but again, it's not always the case in postmodern literature. You tell stories. You tell stories about people who change. Do you consider yourself a storyteller, first and foremost?
Oh yeah, of course. The first thing I do when because I'm a teacher, you know, there's the assumption that because I've written these books, then I could teach people how to write. It's always an illusion, but I do my best. So the first class, I always will bring two examples of fiction to my students. One of them is what I call a tale, and the other is a story. So the tale is a false story. It is disguised like a story, but it's not a story. And the core difference I have them point out at the end of the day is that in the tale, there is no change. So if you look at the reasons why we tell stories in the first place, in fact, the very idea of storytelling is that we were trying, or our ancestors were trying to understand humanity. Why is it that there are people who are Asian looking or white, you know, by people we're thinking about, for instance? Or why is it that somebody can love someone and then, you know, like 10 years later, you despise them? So we tell stories to understand humanity. So stories in themselves look like humanity. So they have characteristics of humanity. So one of the things that is very, very prevalent in human nature, of course, is change. So a story without change is impossible. It's a tale, I believe. So usually my journeys, my stories are a quest to try to understand or explore the reason why someone has changed. Why, for instance, is this close-knit, you know, family of brothers who love each other so much, they would die for each other, they would do anything. Why do they, by the end of the story, or at some point in the story, begin to hate each other? Why is it that this guy in an orchestra of minorities who, you know, gives up his most prized possession for this lady turns out to want to harm her? So that internal shift in human beings, what I like to call the emotional and psychological evolution, is one of the things that I try to explore in my fiction.
Okay, so tell me, how do you go about it? I mean, do you develop your characters, or do you at the beginning of your story, do you know how the story will end? Do you go by the events, or do you go by the character, in other words?
So, well, the thing is, I do not consider that a story has formed until it has truly formed. So I have an idea, I sit down with it, I let it, you know, like cook itself. It's like a meal. It just, you know, you put the ingredients slowly. If it's going to be cooked for 1 hour or 2 hours, it comes together. So it can take 2 years, for instance. It's just all sitting in my head at that point. So by the time I do the actual writing, yes, it's all formed. I know everything. I know the beginning from the end. If I don't, it's impossible to write it down. So, but, you know, that doesn't mean that there are no surprises here and there. You know, in a 300-page novel, obviously there are points in which I haven't thought about before. And the moment where I'm on the page, it releases or reveals itself to me. You know, but the truth is, before anything happens, I conceive of characters. Again, you are telling stories about human beings. Human beings are the center of the universe. They are the reasons why we tell stories. So you're thinking about a lot of things, the fundamental questions of human life, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. You're thinking about all those. And so where do you embody those things? In a character. So I begin my stories from characters, not plot. So I equip a character with characteristics and elements, and it is from them, from those characteristics, that plot emerges. So for me, plot is impossible unless it's a function of character.
So we have the characters, we have the narrator, and I would like to talk about this very specific narrator that you use in your second novel, An Orchestra of Minorities. Tell us about Chi. What is it? Who is it? Who is this guy, Chi? Or is he a guy? What is it?
Yeah. Well, it's an exhaustive cosmological entity, but I will sum it up by saying that the Chi is the logos of divinity, or let me say an index of divinity in every human being. So the Igbos believe, and actually other cultures in Africa, that we are connected to divinity. This is what makes us, to be higher than animals. So there is almost the Christian equivalent of soul, really, in some ways. So the Chi pre-exists before you, and then stays with you throughout your lifetime. So, and then at the death of a person, after the 4 burials, there's a map at the beginning of the novel. After the burials have been completed, then the Chi ascends to the dome of the ancestors, and the high gods, and then give them an account. This is how this guy has lived his life, or this woman has lived her life. So that is the narrator of this novel. So it's a narrator that is able to see beyond the ordinary, the physical.
Your narrator sees beyond the ordinary and sees throughout the history. He's about 700 years old, more or less. And would it be fair to say that he's some kind of equivalent to our guardian angel? Somebody who looks after you, somebody who guides you through the world. Your narrator knows everything about you as well. Would that be fair to say if we were to make this analogy?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Only the problem is that people will tell you that there's no such thing as guardian angel in the Bible, or in Judeo text. But yeah, that analogy would be correct. The only difference is there is a paradox at the heart of it, which is that the Chi cannot compel you against your will. So there is, even though there is this, entity who can see beyond, who can, and sometimes even anticipate what is yet to happen, but it cannot compel one against their will. So in that way, the Igbos believe at an axiomatic fundamental level that the best lives is one that is in complete friendship between the man or the human being and his Chi. Once there is discordance, that's where Abulu emerges, because there's a conflict between the Chi and the person. So that was how the Igbos explained schizophrenia, madness, insanity, and all kinds of things. So your Chi is sentient, but it cannot force you against your will, because you yourself are a sentient being.
You're touching upon one thing, something which is, I think, very important and very striking about your novel, because it deals with the subject of free will and predestination as well. The narrator in the novel, Chi, he knows everything about his host, as you mentioned, but he can influence his life only to some extent. And this is also, paradoxically, I think this is also quite similar to Christian idea of free will as well. Jesus gives you free will. You can do whatever you want with it. At least this is what Christians believe. And we know that your main character's Chinonzo's story is going to end up badly. We somehow know it. We sense it. We know it from the very beginning because we are told from the very beginning that it's going to end up badly, so I'm not spoiling everything for those of you who haven't read the novel. But there's nothing anybody can do about it, including Chi. Is that how Igbo people see their lots, see their fate? And is it still how most people in Nigeria, or most people at least from your part of Nigeria, from Igbo people think about life?
Well, the reason why the Chi tells the story the way it does is because if you look at the two novels, as you did mention earlier, there is the story of the fishermen is told partly as a confessional. So, Benjamin is standing before a court, and then he's telling the story. This is why my brothers and I did all these things. This was how our life turned out. So I don't know, something draws me to the story, what I like to call the fiction of witness, where you are standing before these courts. I mean, think of classic Greek narratives. They had that kind of framework. Odyssey, for instance, is like a narrative to the gods as well. So I think that confessional gives the Chi the reason to be at this court at this point. So, and then gives the reason for us to listen to this story. So, so that he says that, okay, look, this crime has been committed. This is where this story will end. Does not mean that some things that we know everything. No. Almost every narrative at every point is still a surprise, down to the very end. Oh, what will he do next? So this was how ancient stories were told. The most interesting stories were told a convergence of people as a confessional. So, okay, we know that this man has committed this crime. This is why the village council has brought him here. Okay, tell your story to us, to the whole village. And then he begins. And then we are surprised along the way. Even though we know what he has done, he has probably killed someone or he has stolen something, but how he arrives there is itself the story. So I think Arundhati Roy says that was how she conceived of her own, of the God of Small Things, for instance. So the idea that the great stories are the stories whose ending but you've heard them again and again, but each time you inhabit them, they feel new. They are full of surprises. So that's why the story, I think, is told that way. But one last point, very quickly, is I don't think that there is a belief in predestination necessarily. So the Igbos believe that there are forces that are fighting to prevail over your life. So the good and evil forces. So your Chi tries to ward them off. So sometimes in the novel, the Chi leaves the body of the host. It inhabits the body of the host and goes and fights against bad spirits, right? In this esoteric space. So, but you can change your destiny if you want. So this, in Things Fall Apart, for instance, Achebe's novel, one of the first novels in the African tradition, is this. So Okonkwo, by sheer will, changed his destiny. So his destiny then does not resemble that of his father, who was a poor, not good, not well-to-do man. Okonkwo succeeded by the sheer strength of his own will.
How real is the world you're talking about to normal Nigerians? Do they accept that there is this reality which exists parallel to the so-called normal world?
Yeah. Yes, in fact, they do. If you look at my name, for instance, Chigozie, Chinua, I mean, these are prefix. The chi there is speaking to my chi, is trying to evoke my chi. So
So if we have
when I
Chinua
was,
Achebe or Chimamanda
yes,
Ngozi
yes.
Adichie, this is where it comes from.
So the chi there is the chi gozie is referring to the chi. So there's still a belief in it. The thing is that Christianity has dampened and really weakened that religious concept. But what the African has done across the continent, not just in Nigeria, is that we have taken Western civilization and cultures, whether it be Christianity or whether it be even democracy. The way democracy is is practiced in across Africa is not the same way it is practiced in Poland or in America. It might look in theory like the same, but it's fundamentally different. So what we have done is that we have filled in certain spaces, holes that we find in these borrowed cultures with elements of the Igbo cosmological and supernatural beliefs. For instance, my dad is I like to use him as an example. He's a Western educated man. He loves the West. I mean, he was an enthusiast for education and all that, but yet he believes in reincarnation. He does. He believes that I am not me. I am, the replica, the avatar of his uncle who died around the time when I was born. He will tell you that there are evidences for that, and you cannot persuade him otherwise. So he is a Western man. He's an African at the same time. So we are these, we have this conflict of words. So this is why I believe that to just tell a Nigerian story as if you're writing a Western novel is unconceivable to me. So in all my writings, you have the words existing parallel to each other, the realist world and the world of the supernatural, because this is how we conceive of the world.
Let's continue talking about what you've just started, which is this mix of Western and African themes and worlds, as a matter of fact. You use Western mythology as well in your novels. You allude to it. You comment on them, on it in your books. Characters talk about it as well. Tell us how you see the meeting of the two, how you grew up to understand and to somehow marry the two traditions within you as a writer. How did it start, and how did you get to know these stories about Greek mythology, Shakespeare, and stuff like that?
So I was born into a post-colonial setting. So think of all the implications of that. So my grandfather did not know that he was a Nigerian. He was a Nigerian, obviously, but he did not know about it. Nobody told him that he was a Nigerian. In 1914, the British came. They, with orders from London, they named Nigeria. They created a country. So, but my grandfather, living in his village, was not aware until he died. So, but his son became aware. Well, I'm a Nigerian. So then he passed it on to us. Well, now Nigeria has become independent. The Africans are the one in charge of everything. So, but the fact that it is still very recent, that just not too long ago we were different people, still makes us not completely, Western, even though all we have now, I'm speaking English, I write in English and all these things. I did not take a traditional Igbo education. I have a Western my conception, all the philosophers I read are Western ones. Hegel, Marx, whoever, put all of them in there, Flaubert. But the thing is that I live in an Africa, or I grew up in an Africa that still has evidences of that and realities of the way they used to see the world. And that was very interesting for me, because I feel like as it's dying, as the world becomes more globalized, as the elites like myself, who now lives in the US, which is obviously not Africa, live, there is a need for me to monumentalize some of these aspects of culture that are dying out. So that's one of the reasons for An Occasional Minorities as a novel. So I wanted to put in novel form that cosmological world and make it real and realize it on the page. So, but, I am a Western educated person. My aesthetics was really shaped by Shakespeare, Greek mythology, and all of that. So I cannot divorce any of that from myself. And all the things I read, all the books I read mostly were in English or Yoruba, mostly. I mean, 90%, 95% in English, 5% in Yoruba.
Were you taught that literary tradition at school or at home? Or?
Yes. Oh, yeah, of course. So the curriculum aped the British one. It still is. So in fact, I never read an American until maybe I was like, 14 or 15. So because the Nigerian academic curricula is still like, fashioned around the British one. So I grew up having had a solid understanding of English literature. Not literature in English, but I mean British literature, but also wider literature written in the English language.
And at the same time, the African tradition. And were you aware of the African writers where you were growing up as well?
Yes, they worked in concert with each other. So we're reading, obviously, Wole Soyinka, Achebe, Florent Wampa, and other African, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, for instance, and, most of the Ghanaian Ayi Kwe Parks, and some of these other people, from the Ghanaian tradition.
There's one question that comes to my mind. You write about heavy subjects. This is all quite important. You write linear stories. You don't write about yourself. In a sense, you're a very traditional, unmodern writer. Do you see, perhaps, by the way, that's the reason of your success? Because perhaps people just need this kind of literature. How do you place yourself in the tradition of African literature or Western literature or the world literature? Do you think about that at all?
Well, I think that people will place those things for me because, I envy you, for instance. You've read 2 of my novels. I don't read my books. so I don't place, I only write them. Once I pick up this book, except maybe, in an event, then I read an extra. But I cannot stand reading my work that has been published. It's very difficult. So I don't know to
Why is it
bring
so?
that.
Because you find all the mistakes that you've made, or what?
Yeah. And then I start to regret and review how bad, I have just performed. So I do not consider myself, I do not look at my work from that critical perspective because it is external to me. The books themselves are internal because, this is the machine that produces them. So, but that said, of course, I am aware of the traditions that come before me. And, I've been criticized as, somebody who uses Western tropes. But I cannot conceive of of a great African novel that doesn't use those tropes. Because, I mean, Achebe, for instance, used to say that the idea of abandoning the English language or the Western aesthetics is almost impossible because we are a product of that. You know, even if I were to go and live, you know, I wouldn't live in Akure or any city, and I don't want to come in contact with anything Western. No, the government of the local government where I will be living will still be structured around the Western. So it's not something that I can escape. It's not of my own will that I am here. So, I am in some ways a Western African, you know, and who knows, the way Africa is going, we might become Eastern Africa, like, you know, when China takes over everything. So, but right now, you know, there's no such thing as Africa in its own. It is a Western Africa. It's a reality that we have. You know, people will tell you that is, you know, they don't want to talk about that kind of thing, but sadly, it is so. So the idea of divorcing yourself from everything that is Western is too late. So in that sense, I see myself as straddling both cultures. But the elements of what I write about, I think, are truly different from what people generally write. Even though it seems like I have linear narratives, they are not really so. As you said, Dichi is telling a story, not just of one man, but of a civilization. He's telling stories of people who have lived 700 years ago, of slavery, of the first encounter of West Africans with the Portuguese. This is not a story that is linear at all. In fact, it's a cosmic story in a way.
Of course, I didn't mean to simplify it. I just
I know, I understand.
I just believe that your stories, we are able to tell it, you know, in a short paragraph what your books are about, which doesn't necessarily apply to all modern literature. Let's put it that way.
That's true. That's true. But I think that you have to have a plot.
Of course.
Which is why my books are.
No, it works on different levels, and the narrative is very complicated in these novels. What I'll continue a little bit about that. Okay. What excites you about literature? What do you read, for instance?
Well, all of these things being said and done, I think what drew me to literature is probably in many ways dying, at least in the West, as far as I know. It was language. So the philosopher, the Western philosopher that I admired the most was a philosopher of linguistics, of language in all its divergent forms. His name was George Steiner, and he talks about how people who were writing in the first English tradition, whether it be Chaucer or John Milton or Shakespeare, the great prose stylists of those times, the way they approached the English language, they saw it as a kind of sacred virgin field, like a cave of riches that has been lying on the, you know, beneath the surface of the universe for a long time, waiting for people to discover them, you know, the gold and all of these things. So if you look at how, especially Shakespeare, the way that he constructed language, the way he wrote, the flights of prose, these were as if one was, you know, like committing a kind of magic to the page. So for me, that is the first, that is the beginning, and in some ways the end and the height of literature for me. So I hope that I, you know, in most of my writings, even though I'm doing all these, you know, different things, I want to write fiction where the language soars and it reaches, you know, so these are the kind of books that I read. I read a lot of poetry. I love the works of Nabokov, you know, again, Shakespeare, Cormac McCarthy.
Do you have a favorite
Salman
writer?
Rushdie.
A writer you can't live without?
I don't know if that. Well, maybe I probably always would read. Probably again. I think I will return to Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think he's essential.
Okay, the time has come to talk about politics. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead. Yes. So
Yeah,
so you've done 70% of literature. So
well,
I'm
actually,
ready for that.
yeah, 2/3. So, yeah, in both of these books, one of the central issues is an aspiration of at least one or even more characters to get away from Nigeria. Only then can they achieve, or in the case of the fisherman, it's the father who thinks only then can they achieve what they're aiming for. Can they be fully realized as human, their human potential. Also, you don't shy away from pointing the blame, for telling who's responsible for that being the case in Nigeria. From your books, it is a very unjust society. Do you see yourself partly as a social commentator as well?
Of course. I mean, these things will emerge. Again, you're writing about humanity. You are writing about how society is structured. What is politics? Politics to me is the machinery by which society is organized. You see what I'm saying? So this is what politics is. I mean, in other places, there are different connotations of politics. Like, for instance, I live in the US. And one thing that strikes me and that surprises me is that people see the office of the presidency as something very different from what, having lived in Nigeria for 20-something years and partly in Turkey, you know, they see the office of the president as almost like a godlike office. You know, like the president has to be a moral beacon. He has to be all of these things. And that's kind of an interesting dynamic because if in Nigeria, you know, some people might not even know who the president is. I mean, why do you care if your life is good? If, you know, if things are working for you, you don't even remember, oh, who is there? Is it this guy? Okay. You know, yes. I've not even thought of him in 2 months, you know. But no, in America, that is impossible. Every single day, people wake up and they are thinking about their president. It's like, you know, he's some kind of force who is ubiquitous, you know. So, so you have to think of politics. You set your characters in these places. So, in the case of Nigeria, Thus, my characters are of course trying to make to understand why their lives are like this. So the fisherman, for instance, is said to be a kind of a metaphor for why Nigeria became the way it is. And the project at the heart of An Orchestra of Minorities is, look, we have been trying for a long time to ape the West. We have tried everything. We have a federal American system, political structure in Nigeria right now. Is it working? How about the way society was put together before? Is there something we can learn from the way things used to be? Okay, yes, we didn't have extreme, great technology in pre-colonial times. But anybody who knows about history will tell you that in any Igbo town, it was impossible for you to find somebody who is homeless or somebody who doesn't have food to eat. What does it even mean? It's not something that my people could comprehend. Oh, this guy doesn't have a house. Of course, we will build him a house. everybody will come together and build a place for the person to stay. So the African, the West African Igbo thinking, Yoruba thinking, even Benin, in all the tribes that make up Nigeria, this was the same with them. We did not, the individual was almost it was relevant, but also in many ways irrelevant when it came to the commonwealth, the common good. Now that we have a Western structure, that is out the window. What you have is that the individual predominates. And so if I assume a political position in Nigeria today, and if I start like trying to make the society better, my family will tell me that I'm an idiot. Why don't you enrich us? Why don't you make our life better? And you are caring. What is your business with the guy across the road? No. So you can see how things have changed. So Nigeria is, in some ways, an evil country, the way that it is now. There is a great amount of suffering in the country that shouldn't be so. It's an extremely failed state. In fact, it's a very sad entity. So this is why, for anyone who actually can have like true meaning in life, you really have to live. Look at all the Nigerian intellectuals or writers, even artists. Almost none of them lives in Nigeria anymore. Is that not a sad thing? It is.
Just before we go on, to remind the audience here and the people who are watching us, you can ask Chigozie questions if you want to, and I will pass them later on. In an orchestra of minorities, the central metaphor of the book, as a matter of fact, refers to this lack of solidarity, that people are suffering, all they left with is a helpless cry, similar to that of the chicken when they see their fellow chicken taken by a predator bird. Is it reversible, in your opinion? I mean, you didn't choose to stay in Nigeria. As you say, all the writers, all the people who aspire to do greater things, they leave the country. All you're left with is corrupted politicians and Western companies taking out your resources. Is it reversible?
Well,
or Chinese companies, for that matter.
Yeah, coming now. Well, so there is a very complicated answer, but this is a wonderful question. One of the rare questions that have been asked. I will begin by saying that I am in many ways a public figure now. So if I say things, people will, of course, dissect them and think about them. So I will be careful, but I will say this, that one of the reasons why I think I'm very pessimistic about the state of Nigeria and most African countries, for that matter, is because the West, which controls everything, sadly, is creating an atmosphere where there has to be dogma in everything. So there are certain ways that you can't talk about Nigeria. There are certain things you can't say. It doesn't matter the topic. Even being, like race, for instance, being a black person, you can't say something. So when you shut off a whole vote, an entire world of ideas, so we just have to grope for the few things that are remaining. So if I say, for instance, that Nigeria is this is what is wrong with Nigeria. If I say that, I will be attacked at somebody who is, this. So, but my answer is that no, there's nothing that can save Nigeria from itself right now. It's in a gridlock. My image of Nigeria is of a fortified enclave. So think of a castle, in say Game of Thrones, for instance, or in pre-modern West, fortified, and how it's impenetrable by external forces. So this is how the elites have entrenched their corrupt forces into the soul and fabric of Nigeria. So I was just communicating with the Showore, the Nigerian prisoner, you know, who he tried to start a revolution last year during the election. And right now he's been in jail for a long time and he's been arrested. Ask yourself, why is it that despite the poverty and the wealth in a place like Nigeria and across Africa, Congo, for instance, for so long we tolerate these systems? Part of it is because a revolution is impossible in Africa right now. You can't have that, it won't work. You can start it, it will be quenched very easily. So you know, again, it's because of the fortress kind of thing. So for you to create a change in a country like Nigeria, you have to do it in a different way. So.
But you don't see that way. There is.
I see it. But I cannot say it.
You cannot say it.
I don't want to. I don't want to put myself on the spot. But I feel like, you know,
you'd be hated in your own country as a traitor.
Not exactly. No, not exactly. But the people in power will have a problem with me.
All right.
But the thing that I can say, which I have said and I have been fought against for that, is the leaders of Nigeria. They are the greatest barrier to its development. So I like to say it. No, I've never seen anybody who has a political position in Nigeria that loves the country. I think it's the people who hate it the most who are ruling. The president of Nigeria right now hates Nigeria. He has no love for the country. It is obvious. He might say otherwise, but you can tell when somebody loves something. So when you have your enemies ruling you, what is going to happen? Of course, there will be in fact, it's even a miracle that anything is working right now in Nigeria. I expect it to be worse than it is, because these are truly enemies of the entity itself.
So what remains? Is immigration the only answer to it? There are plenty of millions of people from all over the world trying to settle in the States and in Europe. They're not going to fit. They're not going to settle in Europe, not all of them. It's a major problem, a political problem, a cultural problem, a civilizational problem, a moral problem, which we all try to face with no good results, as a matter of fact.
So one of the things that can actually solve Nigeria's problem is, I mean, again, this will be an unpopular opinion, is if there's nowhere to go, then the country will change. Then revolution will be possible. Now think about, so right now, the Nigerian health sector is one of the worst in the world. So all our doctors, if you go to every hospital in America, I'm not exaggerating, at least 1 in 2 hospitals in the US, you must find a Nigerian doctor. It's nearly impossible. I've never seen, whether it's in Utah or South Dakota, think of the most remotest place you can think of. There is a Nigerian doctor there. So in Nigeria now, we now have like 1 doctor to 5,000 people. There are some towns where there is no doctor at all. Not to now talk of specialists. If you have cancer, what are you going to do? You know, so it's not that we don't have the people, but they have left. So why are the Nigerian politicians not interested in solving the problem of the health sector? Very easy. Last week, the wife of Nigeria's president had a neck pain. You know, like when you wake up and there's a cringe on your neck. She was flown to London immediately. Once she woke up, they flew her to London. So what is the incentive to create any health structure in Nigeria? when all of them can just go, when they are sick, they go to hospitals. So, they don't have interest in it. So, but when they don't have anywhere to go, during this pandemic, when all the borders were closed, many Nigerian politicians and their families were dying. So they started scrambling. Oh my goodness, we need to build hospitals. So actually creating, in fact, I've said it before and I was attacked. Anybody who is going to run for any office anywhere in Africa, their family and all of their relatives their passports should be seized by the government. For 10 years, you cannot leave Nigeria. You will see. You will be surprised. We will have the best medical infrastructure around the world. In fact, Polish people will be streaming to Nigeria, for their health needs. But without that, if it's so easy to go, so this is one of the problems of globalization. But if you say that, oh, you are not a progressive person. So, but this is the truth. It is the practical truth in Nigeria.
That's very unpopular indeed, because what you're suggesting is that we should close the borders, and you're not the first person from the so-called third world country or southern country that I hear it from, because this is how very many people in the countries that export their best people to the West see it.
Yeah.
And I understand your point very, very clearly.
Not to everyone. Don't close the border to everyone. But if you want to have an electoral office in Nigeria, then you should be willing. You are the president of Nigeria. Why should you not use the medical structure that you are responsible for? You see what I'm saying? So I'm not saying the common man should be able to go anywhere they want to go. But yeah, but if you are to help us, if the US or the UK should get involved, stop giving money to these countries. Just do that, and you will see the change that will come about.
How do you feel in the States?
Well, I feel like an exile. I feel like somebody who is, I like America. It's an interesting country. I'm able to work here for what it's worth. But also, as an outsider, I see its own problems. And I think it has its own unique problems. Everybody knows that. Right now, there's a very unpopular president. There's all kinds of problems. The pandemic is worse here, by every measure compared to everywhere else. So, but in general, I think it's still a stable place. I have food to eat. In Nigeria, I'm not saying that Nigeria is not a place to live. The people can still live there. It just is not. There's still a lot of poverty there, but it's a functioning state, in many ways.
I also would like to ask you, because as you mentioned, the country you live in at the moment is passing through a very particular period, a very turbulent period. For instance,
Yes.
how do you take this Black Lives Matter movement? What does it do to you?
Mm-hmm. What does it do to me? Well, what it does to everyone. I think that what is clear from everything that we have seen is that many people, or most people who are not Black or African, of African origin, see us as intimidating, especially the males. Black males are seen as, as intimidating, and there's a lot of fear, to us. So this is the only rational way, aside from racism, to explain why somebody who is standing in just outside his car will be shot not once but 7 times. That's like a hysterical fear, if not racism, which so I think that is very obvious. But for me, I think that obviously I'm a Black person living here, and if I have contact with police, I will be afraid, because I know that they will see me before even knowing me as being somebody who is prone to violence, which is not true. You know, I'm an artist. I do my own thing. So it's a sad period. But I think that racism is something that is going away, or it will go away. I don't believe that most Americans are racist. I do not agree with that at all. Or, you know, how some, so there are some hyperboles that I do not agree with. But they seem like they are truth because everybody says them. You know, you're not allowed to say anything differently. So I do not believe that anybody who is not, for instance, a Libra is racist. No, that's not my experience. I go to church here, and you will be surprised. There's, you know, there are people who they are white. They're like from the south even, and these are like the people that you will think will be the arbiter of racism. But if you come to my church, it's 40% Vietnamese, 20% black, most of us from Africa, and you know, African Americans, and then we have like 15-20% who are white, including the preachers. So how is that? So how are these people racist if they, you know, they are this? So there's a misconception on both sides. The people on the right do not know anything about the people on the left. They just have stereotypes, you know. And the people on the left do not know anything about the people on the right. They just have stereotypes. So you find people just insulting each other. It's like a kind of a almost a childish fight, struggle, you know, that is happening. You know, this one is punching this one based on this. And it's kind of almost funny to watch at times, but also very sad because, you know, humanity should be at the center of everything. We are human beings. I want to live peaceably with my neighbor. I don't care where the person is from or how they look. We ethics dictates that you try to live and let live, right? This is the fundamentals of all relationships.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned about these rituals that seem funny to you. This is probably what's called modern politics at the moment. Are there any questions from the public or from the internet audience? Can I just ask you what you're writing at the moment, what you're working on?
Well,
if you want to talk about it.
I'm writing a novel. Yeah, I'm writing a novel which I think is very, very exciting for me. I don't know if it will be exciting for you, Dariusz. You might not like it, but I believe you will. If you
Why not? I
too.
loved your two novels, and I'm looking forward to the third one.
Yeah, I'm just joking. But see, the premise of the book is related to what we talked about, the parallels of lives as the Igbos conceive it. The fact that the living and the dead live together. So there is a saying, there's a belief that my people have, that the story of any conflict, especially when it involves fighting and arms, cannot be told only by the living, by those who survive. No. The dead and the defeated also tell the story. So that is the place from which the novel is starting from.
That is
so
really
you can
exciting.
Imagine what there will be. Yes.
Because our wars obviously are told by those who lived and those who won.
Well, that is the preconception. So I want to write a novel that challenges that idea, that the stories of like wars, for instance, can only be told by those who live. No, the dead tell their own stories too. But how? You will discover when you read my book.
There's a question from the public. If you were to write a book set in American context, what topic or problem would you be interested in? What problem would you pick up?
That's an interesting question. I mean, obviously a lot of things. I don't think it would be that different from what I've been writing about. So I draw my major themes from the fundamental questions of life. As I said before, you have origin. Why am I here? This is a question that all of us ask ourselves. Where did I come from? Then meaning, what is the point of all this? Why was I born? You know, to live hopefully up to 80 years and then expire. What is the point? Then you have morality. How should I live with other people? What does it mean to be a good, empathetic person? And then you have destiny. What does the future hold? Where will I be 10 years from now? What will happen to the work of Chigozie Obioma or, you know, Nigeria or the US for that matter? So I will still draw my themes from that. But I actually have been conceiving of a novel to be set in the US. I just don't know when I will. So I have a queue of projects. I really don't know where that is, you know, in that queue.
And coming back to the novel you're working on, this is. Do you have a particular war in mind? Because I've heard the novel is going to be about the Biafra War. Is that so? Is that right?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
You're still thinking
That's
about
$1 million question.
Still
because I
about
want you, you know, I want you to be so like hungry
sure
to unravel this mystery.
You shouldn't have talked about it. You shouldn't have talked about it, Chigozie.
But that's the trick, though. I give you a snippet, and then you can. Dariusz, you won't be able to sleep tonight. You will be thinking, "Oh,
when is it going to be ready?" We tell us when is it going to be ready?
Probably by sometime next year. I should finish early next year. I should finish writing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chigozie, it was a privilege to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed
great
it.
time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.